There are two principles that assist us in discovering the goodness or badness of human actions. The first of these principles is the principle of double effect. In cases in which we foresee the possibility or the inevitability of both a good and a bad consequence of a given action, the principle of double effect assists us in determining whether or not one's action is morally justifiable. The principle of double effect involves 5 criteria. The first criteria is that there is no easy alternative in a true dilemma. First, appealing to the principle of double effect is justified only if there is no alternative to the action at issue. This principle can be applied only in a genuine dilemma. The second criteria is that we have to choose the good. The action at issue must be good in its object, or at least neutral. Here, one is considering the object of the action, the first of the 3 sources in determining a moral action. The third is that we cannot intend to do evil. The possible or inevitable evil consequence must not be intended. Here, one is considering the intention. The person in a moral dilemma would prefer that there be no risk of evil at all, but can do nothing about the fact that such a risk, or even worse, the inevitability of evil, does exist. The fourth criteria is that the good outcome cannot be a consequence of the evil outcome. We cannot choose evil so that good will result. We cannot choose robbing a bank in order to pursue the final goal of giving money to the poor. In other words, the end does not justify the means. Here, one is considering the circumstances of the action. The fifth criteria is proportionality. The good consequence must be proportionate to the evil consequence. Here, one is considering the relationship between the consequences themselves. Let's take a look at the 5 criteria in the principle of double effect in action. Take the case of an ectopic pregnancy. In this situation, a mother has ovulated and the egg has been fertilized, creating a new human life. However, the new embryo did not implant in the uterine lining as it is meant to. Rather, the embryo has implanted outside of the uterus in the fallopian tube. This causes a serious problem for both the life of the baby and the life of the mother. For the baby, this will tragically lead to death. Without the proper nutrients to sustain life, which are available within the uterus, the child cannot thrive. The fallopian tube is not designed to provide for the baby, and it is also not large enough to contain the developing child's body. This leads to the mortal danger for the mother. Should the child continue to grow in the fallopian tube, it will eventually burst. This will cause a serious hemorrhage for the mother that is often life-threatening. Let's consider criteria 1, a true dilemma. Is this a true dilemma? The answer is, of course, yes. The second criteria, choosing the good. The object is to save as many lives as possible. In this case, sadly, the child's life cannot be saved. However, the mother's life may be saved. We are choosing to save the mother's life. In doing so, we are sadly accepting, not choosing, but tolerating the death of the human embryo. Remember that I said this was a dilemma. The third criteria is refusing to do the evil. This requires us to consider how the mother's life is to be saved in such an instance. We will give one example that does not fulfill that requirement, and one example that does. One method of saving the mother's life in such a case is a saline injection. This would be injected into the fallopian tube, into the growing embryo itself, and would cause the embryo to die and dissolve. This would spare the mother's life and protect her fallopian tube from bursting. You will hopefully notice that in this case there is an evil outcome that is directly caused. While one may argue that the intention is still to save the mother's life, which is a good intention, this is still the direct killing of the child. The alternative option is to remove part of the fallopian tube itself. In this instance, once again, the mother's life is spared. Also in this instance, the child dies. However, this is considered a natural death for the child, as the death was not brought about on purpose but by the unfortunate natural circumstances of implanting in the fallopian tube. The doctor does not remove the child from necessary nutrients or an environment where the child can thrive, because those things have already been denied the child who is not developing in the uterus. The doctor does remove the possibility of a serious hemorrhage from the mother by removing the section of the fallopian tube. The fourth criteria, the good outcome must not be a consequence of the evil outcome. In this case, the evil consequence that is not intended is the death of the child. Did we kill the baby to save the mother? In the second instance, the child's death is a tragic, natural consequence of the mother's life being saved, but is not the direct means of saving that life. The fifth criteria, proportionality. The fifth criteria would ask whether the removal of the fallopian tube is justified for the saving of the life of the mother. The answer to that question is yes. While the surgery may lead to the mother being less fertile in the future, it should not render her infertile. Even in the case of infertility, the value of the mother's life is greater than her fertility. There are a number of caveats to this situation, as is to be expected with nearly all moral dilemmas. Every ectopic pregnancy is different. Some do not occur in the fallopian tube, but rather in the cervix or another location outside of the uterus. In most cases, when an ectopic pregnancy is discovered, it is because the fallopian tube has already burst and the mother is already experiencing severe bleeding. In some cases, the ectopic pregnancy is discovered at a point when the growing embryo is nearly viable. If there is any circumstance where the child's life may be preserved by medical means outside of the mother's body, then those means must be taken. Modern medicine is not prepared to claim that a child can grow for the entire gestation period outside of the womb, but many strides have been made to make it possible for younger and younger children to survive premature birth. The absolutes in this situation are that we cannot do what we know to be a moral evil, which is directly killing the child. We also have an obligation to help save the life of the mother and the child within reasonable means.